Hello, hello! My name is Ksebati, co-founder and CEO of MySwimPro. In today's video, I'm sharing with you how to run a fully remote company. Whether you're a founder, entrepreneur, CEO, any kind of business, if you're taking it fully remote or you've already started remote, this video is going to share 10 different tips that I've learned along the way of building MySwimPro, a fully distributed company. Over the last 5 years, we've grown to over a dozen team members spread out over 10 different time zones. And my hope is that by sharing our experience and being fully transparent with you, you can learn some tips along the way that you can apply to your business to be competitive in these crazy, crazy times. Now, the first tip that I recommend is to build the proper structure. So what does that mean? What I'm talking about is the operational flow of your business. When you're building a fully remote company, you have to think about it differently, whether it's a typical brick and mortar shop, e-commerce, technology enabled company. It really doesn't matter. If you're going fully remote and your team members that you're communicating with are not going to be in the same physical location as you, the way you mentally approach the business needs to be different. And so the operational flow, as I would describe it, would mean your meetings, your communication, the operation of that business, the way things get done has to be done differently. And if you think about it from the perspective of having an in-office brick and mortar, you will set yourself up for failure, whether it's in the short term or in the long term. Something will fall through the cracks and you're not really going to optimize yourself in the best way possible. So the step number one is to actually change the way that you think about the business. Take a step back, think about what is the problem you're solving, what is your solution, who is the team that you have hired or are going to hire that are going to be able to execute on that specific objective of yours, and then you have to change your operational flow to adapt to that. And all of these different steps and tips are actually going to tie into that. So number two, it's applying the right technology. So obviously the way you communicate is extremely important, whether that's through video calls. So at MySwimPro, for example, we do a daily video call with the entire company. Whether you're on the marketing side, you have a marketing daily stand-up. On the technology side, we have a technology product daily stand-up. And then once a week, we do an all-team all hands meeting. So everyone in the company is on a video call. Everyone pretty much sees another member of the team every single day. And so by applying the right technology, the tools, whether you're using Slack for communication or some other platform, if you have an internal wiki like we do, so that way we can keep all of our documents organized, whether it's in a drive somewhere online, you have to have the right tools, and those tools will be different. I'll link a few in the description of this video, but the tools of running a remote company are actually different than if you have brick and mortar, and you rely on those tools so much more when you run a remote business. You also have to think about the digital and the physical world when it comes to technology. So it's not just having the right digital tools, but that technology can actually be in the physical space. So having a physical location in your house, if you're going to a co-working space, right? You have to actually have the right tools, meaning the right kind of desk, the right kind of lighting if you're doing video calls. And thinking about those things separate from the software that you actually use, whether that's email or anything like that. So it's a little bit different, whether it's physical or digital. Next, it's important to set clear goals and expectations. This is probably one of the biggest challenges of going from an at-office location to going fully remote, because not only will you set business goals, which is standard across remote or in-person, each team member will have their goals. That's not going to be any different, but you have to be even more clear about those, because you're not going to get the opportunity to have those water cooler conversations where you can just say, hey, you know what, you're really focusing on this. You don't have those opportunities with team members. So as the leader, as the CEO, it is your job to be extremely specific with what the business goals are, what each individual team member's goals are, and then how do they accomplish those goals within a time horizon. So if you're spread out over 10 different time zones, right, it doesn't make sense for everyone to be working the exact same hours. Maybe that's how you do it in your business, but you have to set those expectations. If you're spread out over the course of the world, you have to figure out if you're going to do this asynchronous communication or you're forcing everyone to be online at a certain period of time. And the way that you go about that is going to be different based on your business, based on the culture that you want to develop. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. So for example, the expectation at MySwimPro is we are spread out over 10 different time zones. There is a little bit of overlap for the product team, for the marketing team, regardless of what time zone that you're in. However, we set the meetings so that they're in the middle of the day, essentially. You know, the earliest meeting for someone is 8 a.m. and the latest meeting for anyone is 5 p.m. And so that can actually change over the course of the year with different time zone adjustments. But it's really important that you set the expectation of, we don't expect you to be on the clock 24/7. We have certain critical moments like the one that we're in right now in March of 2020. So people are online a little bit more, but you have to set the expectation of saying, you know what, I don't want you online for Saturday and Sunday or Wednesdays or whatever it is that you do. You have to be very clear about that, or else people are going to be confused on your team about the expectation of working 24/7, which will burn out your team members. So you don't want to have that. You want to make sure that everyone's set up for long-term success. And those expectations can actually be role specific. For example, if you have a customer service agent, maybe you have like 5 of them, you could have someone working on the weekends only, someone working in the middle of the week, and that can change based on the role, where you might not have that. Actually, you could have that in a physical location. I think number 4, it might be the most important point of all of this. It's documentation. Everything has to be written down. This is not a water cooler conversation that you can have on a Thursday afternoon with 3 of the team members and then, oh, I forgot to mention this to my other team member, and then you can bring them in with a text message. Everything has to be written down in one centralized location, whether you use Drive or an internal wiki like we do to keep all of your documentation. Everyone should know everything about the company at all times. Transparency is really big at MySwimPro, so documentation is huge because it is very easy when you're running a remote company for things to slip through the cracks. And if you've run any organization for any period of time, you know exactly what I mean when things slip through the cracks. For example, at MySwimPro, when it comes to expectations, technology, and process, we have a no email policy. We do not send emails to each other. Email is reserved for people who are outside of the company to communicate with us. Maybe we'll have a CC, but that's only because we're communicating with someone outside of the company. Any internal communication is done on our internal messenger. We don't use like a WhatsApp. I've seen some other companies that sound like a horror story, that they only communicate on WhatsApp. Now that might work if you're only 2 people, but you're not setting yourself up to scale if you choose to hire additional people, because last time I checked, it's near impossible to search an archive of WhatsApp or any other messaging tool any more than a few days or a week. I also recommend that you have very strict role definitions and processes. This means each team member knows exactly what they're working on and as it relates to the business goals. If every single team member doesn't know what they're specifically working on, then it's really hard to align the team in a remote environment. Now, a lot of this is actually true for a in-office experience, but these problems become amplified in a remote working setting. So who does what? And avoid wasting time figuring out who's doing what in a remote environment, because that means you're going to have to chat someone. You can't just lean over and say, hey, who is responsible for this document or sending this email or this communication with a partner. You have to have all this documented and everyone knows who's doing what. At MySwimPro, every single team member has 3 core objectives of their job function, right? Each of those tie to the company business goals, the team member goals, but they have 3 things. They know exactly why they're hired and what they're specifically working on in order of importance, right? Number 1 is to work on X, Y, and Z. Number 2 is to implement whatever. And then step number 3 is maybe to support the marketing team or support the product team in this specific way. But everyone knows what they're doing. And if you don't have that in place in a remote environment, you will certainly set yourself up for failure at some point in the future. Number 6, the one-on-one cadence. Now, this is actually potentially the most important in a remote environment, because if you don't see anyone in real life, it can become lonely. It's hard to get a real pulse on what's going on, the communication layers. So if you're a leader, you need to figure out how often are you communicating with all of your either senior leaders, if you have a big enough organization and you have that kind of a hierarchy, or if you're only 5 people, how often are you doing a one-on-one with every team member? Is it once every 2 weeks? Is it once every week? It could be either of those. There isn't really a right or wrong answer. It really depends on your business, how you're set up. At MySwimPro, we started doing one-on-ones every single 2 weeks with each team member, and then we built a little bit of a hierarchy where we have senior leader on the product side, on the marketing side. They will do one-on-ones once every 2 weeks. I do a one-on-one with everyone in the company. Now we have 13 people once a month. So I'll still meet with every single person once a month, and then I meet with my senior leaders at least once every 2 weeks, but I also see them in the specific weekly meetings that we'll have, whether it's product or marketing. I think number 7, as I mentioned, number 4, the documentation is super important. When it comes to being remote, culture is incredibly important. So to stay focused on culture is completely different in a remote environment than it is in person, because in person, the culture can essentially die when everyone goes home. Maybe there's a pressure to go to an after hours, event or something like that. But in the most part of it, the culture actually dies. When you're fully remote, you don't really have that differentiation. And so people connect with people. And so yes, you might have 8 hours, I work from 9 to 5 in the afternoon, and then my job is complete. However, in a remote working environment, every team member brings something unique to the table. Now, this is true in an office setting, and I recommend for teams building a culture, how do you leverage that, knowing that these two people who might not actually ever meet each other in real life when they start working, how do they share the passions and the knowledge that they have when it's not as simple as going out and having a lunch meeting with someone else, right? So how can you take that knowledge and bring it together? What we do at MySwimPro is we do an educational showcase at our all hands. So this might be every week, every other week, depends on what's going on, but we'll have each team member take a turn, and for that week, they have a 10 to 15 minute presentation on sharing something about themselves, where they live, maybe they know how to cook, maybe they have an athletic talent that we don't know about, and they can actually share things about themselves. We also play virtual games, so think of like Pictionary or different games that are both creative and intellectually stimulating that allow everyone on the team to learn about each other. We also do a team retreat. Last year we went to Mallorca, Spain. It was incredible. We rented a castle, literally, and it was an awesome way to do team building exercises, work on the company's strategy. We created awesome content. Make sure you check out that video. I'll link in the description below. And again, it's focusing on culture differently than if you have an office, because people are people, whether they're in an office or they're remote. But in a remote setting, you have to be a little bit more creative when you craft these things and really focus on the individual uniqueness of each team member and what they bring to the table. Number 8, be flexible. Every company is different. So every industry, every company, based on the size of the company, every team member is unique, just like we talked about from a team culture perspective. And so because every single team member is different, every single company is different, you have to be willing to adapt, right? The reason why I'm sharing what we do at MySwimPro is so you can have a little bit of insight into how our company operates. There's a lot of documentation about how we do everything, from our investor updates, what I blog on LinkedIn, or even the MySwimPro website. There's a lot of content out there. And so hopefully this video adds a little bit of context into how we actually operate. But keep that in mind, that your business is completely different. So whether you're running a technology company or a different kind of business, whether you have 4 people, 12 people, 20, 200 people, it really doesn't matter, because every business will be different. So you can't 100% line yourself up. So just know that, and be aware that in the remote world, there really aren't standard practices. There are some amazing remote companies that have put out a lot of transparent information, but your company will be different than theirs. Take what you can, learn, and adapt. Number 9, engage every single team member. Remember, we talked every team member is unique, but you might not know what their unique skills or talents are beyond what they do in the scope of the job. So you want to bring those out as much as possible, not only empower people to the mission of your company, but you also want to engage their involvement outside of their domain. Meaning, let's say you have an engineer, 90-something% of the time they're working on that engineering specific problem while you hired them. But maybe there's an opportunity for them to write a blog post about an experience that is relevant in some capacity. Maybe on the flip side, someone on the marketing can do something video that they don't normally do, right? Thinking of different ways that, and you empowering your team members to take advantage of the skills that they have, the interests, the experiences, and apply that into the company to add value in a way that you didn't actually hire them to do it in the first place. And it sort of sprinkles on that added benefit of having such a unique, talented workforce that could potentially be in multiple time zones in multiple countries. Number 10 is to learn and adapt fast. It will change. Time will change. We live in a crazy world, absolutely crazy. Businesses are adapting and pivoting like ours is, on the fly, by the day, by the hour. And so you have to know that as a remote company, things move faster. Things also can amplify and spin out of control much more quickly as well. So it's really important to factor in a lot of the structure and the operational flow concept of changing the way you think about this. This is not a typical brick and mortar business. When you're fully remote, you have to think about it from that perspective. The fact that you have people over potentially multiple time zones, working from home or a co-working space. Every element of that makes an impact on the decisions that you make, and it's really important to think about every strategy and operational question you have in your mind from that perspective. That being said, your ability to adapt quickly is the differentiator in how successful you will be, not only in remote work, but in the business in general. And I've learned over time, the faster that we can make decisions, the more successful we will become. I forgot to mention, when it comes to engaging every team member, a prime example of how we do this at MySwimPro is every single month we do an investor update, like a community update, and every single team member is in the investor update. They film themselves, it's really creative, and as we add team members, this has become more complicated, and we'll see how long we can keep doing this, but it's a way to engage the entire team in the mission of the organization. For us, it's empowering aquatic prowess for swimmers around the world. A lot more fun and exciting things coming for our company in this chaotic time that is March 2020. So if you're a business owner and you've recently transitioned into remote work, I would love to know in the comments what your experience has been like. If you're a veteran of remote work and you've made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know in the comments as well. If you enjoyed it and you want more content like this, let me know what you'd like by subscribing, like the video, and we'll catch you guys later.